Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thank you for joining us. My name is Karen Berman. I'm the CEO of the American Society of the University of Haifa, and we're thrilled to have you join us today for our webinar on behavioral economics in the time of COVID. I'm joined today by Jake Scharfman and by Professor Doron Kliger, who is an expert in behavioral economics. He studies real-time data gathered in field experiments to uncover people's behavior in real-life financial situations. Professor Kliger is a faculty member in the Department of Economics in University of Haifa's Herta and Paul Amir Faculty of Social Sciences. He's the chair of the Graduate Studies in the Economics Department and the head of specializations in behavioral economics, which is a joint venture with the Technion. Professor Kliger is also head of the In Progress Research Center called FIBER, the Finance and Behavioral Economics Research Center. That's a hub for research and education, serving to bridge the gap between the academic community and the public and private sectors. Certainly, this is a very busy time for him, and we're thrilled that he was able to join us today. And with that, he has some amazing information for all of you. So you don't want to hear from me, you want to hear from him. So I'm going to turn the conversation over to him and to Jake, who'll be leading you through it today. Thank you very much, and thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much, Karen, and welcome everybody from around the world. As Karen mentioned, today we're joined by Professor Doron Kliger, a faculty member in the Department of Economics at the University of Haifa, who will be discussing ways in which economic behavior is changing in response to the stresses of the COVID-19 pandemic. A little bit more about Professor Kliger. He's been published in a wide range of journals on topics including asset pricing, behavioral economics and finance, decision-making, and industrial organization. His research has earned him awards from the Institute of Certified Public Accountants, the Knesset, and the Fulbright Fellowship. Today, Professor Kliger's expertise is more relevant probably than ever amid the seismic shifts in economic behavior in arenas ranging from grocery stores to governments to global financial markets, which have been in disarray as of late. Professor Kliger has put together a fascinating presentation about behavioral economics during this pandemic, which he will be sharing with you shortly. After the presentation, we will open it up to questions from the audience that we will receive. You can submit those questions at any time during this presentation via the Q&A button on the bottom of your Zoom screen. That's not the chat button, it's the Q&A button at the bottom of the Zoom screen, or by emailing info@asuh.org. That's info@asuh.org. Professor, thank you so much for joining us today, and I will hand things over to you to get started.
Thanks a lot. It's really nice to be with you, electronically, of course. And I really appreciate this opportunity. It's really a thrill for me. I hope I will deliver. I'll just open the presentation and start the talk. Okay, so the talk will discuss economic behavior and behavioral economics. Economic behavior, that I will use this term to refer to the rational part in economics. And behavioral economics, this is the animal spirits, feelings and emotions, etc. So we'll start with some facts about economic behavior. I'll start with some figures about the estimated damage to the world economy, to the world's GDP. And these figures are taken from the updated report of Oxford Economics. So what you see here is three scenarios. The red one is the baseline pre-coronavirus scenario of real GDP growth. The blue one is the updated, given that we know there is an epidemic. So there is, as you see, somewhat decline in real GDP. And the orange yellow one, this is a downside scenario. You may refer to it as a worst case scenario. So comparing these two COVID-19 scenarios to the regular development that was predicted before, we see a decline of about 2.5% in real growth of GDP by the baseline, And in the worst case scenario, there will be a downside of 4%. So this is a kind of a grim picture, but there is also a brighter side for it, which is that the main damage is only temporary. The permanent, as you can see in this graph, the permanent damage in the baseline scenario is about 0.2%, and the permanent damage in the worst case is more or less 1% decline in real GDP. Looking at another important source of information, OECD's projections, GDP is they also have two scenarios. The contained scenario, which basically now it's, we may say, obsolete. That was the hope that the epidemic will retain more or less within the Far East. So the prediction was of a decline in 0.5% in real world GDP. And regretfully, I may say, we are now in the downside scenario, which predicts a decline in 1.5% of the world GDP. But as you can see in the histogram, there is, even in this worst case scenario, there is going out of the crisis toward the end of the year. So most of it will be contained within Q2 and Q3, and Q4 is, we may say, awful, but at least it starts to converge to routine. Now let's look at some immediate reactions versus these forecasts. So what you can see here is air traffic over China in regular days. That's the left-hand side. And nowadays, this picture is from February 14th. Today, it's even, the sky is even clearer. So a clear sky has two faces. Of course, it has a lot of damage to the economy here, but maybe the side effect is also clearer air, etc. So this is manifested in all of the indicators that we can see. Here is yet another picture. On the left-hand side, you can see mainland China on, say, regular days before the pandemic. And on the right-hand side, this is nowadays. So the left-hand picture basically shows like a lung of a very ill person. And today, this lung is rather clean. Another picture, nice picture from The Guardian a day before yesterday. You can see here New Delhi, before and after. Taken from the same spot. There are some pictures from several places like this. And as you can see, that water pollution and air pollution, the situation has improved dramatically. So the takeaway here is, okay, the situation, we are in a crisis, but maybe we have also some good spots that we would like already today to start thinking how we preserve some of it for after the crisis is over. Here are also some immediate reactions. These are car sales in China, and you can see at the right of the histogram that basically car sales went down to zero, minus 92% from regular. So there is no manufacturing, almost no manufacturing, and almost no sales of cars in China today. And this picture is representative also of other goods and commodities. What you can see here is yet another picture of smartphone sales, mainly exports from China. And this is Q1 has already been materialized. You can see the sharp decline, but in addition, you can see in this picture that this decline is about to be over within half a year. And later on, you can even see a very mild compensation, but going back to routine and figures go up again. So now let me skip from economic behavior to behavioral economics. That is from all these rational forecasts and what we see and do to moods, emotions, and what we observe people do in the financial markets. So this is the initial reaction of the stock markets due to COVID-19. The graph here is it ends about mid-March. So you can see this is the American picture. NASDAQ, which is the index, is referred to be the index of the technology firm, went down by 23%. S&P 500, which is the index of the 500 largest firms, went down by 26%. Dow Jones and New York Stock Exchange by the same magnitude. The picture in Europe is very similar. For instance, you can take a look at FTSE and DAX indexes. So all the main stock exchanges went down by a magnitude of order of 30%. Interestingly, when we take a look at the Far East, we also see a plunge in prices, but the picture is much milder. So Shanghai Stock Exchange went down by more or less 9%, 10%. And again, the same picture, but much milder. After, within, say, the last month, there started to be some kind of going back to say, normal markets. After this plunge, as you can see, S&P 500 index started to go up again. The same for Europe. So FTSE here is an example, a representative example. So again, a mild, say, correction. And also in Shanghai, there is an incline in prices in the last month. So to summarize this picture, from the beginning of the year, the crash has been in the order of magnitude of 30 to 35% in USA and Europe. In Asia, it was smaller, say 15%. And up to date, there is some recovery. So the total damage to these markets in USA is about 14%, in Europe, about 23%, and in Asia, it's about 10%. And the question is, why is the decline, even after this partial recovery, why is it larger, significantly larger than the decline in GDP? And there could be several reasons for it. One reason is maybe the economic predictions were wrong. And interestingly, Oxford Economics, the prediction that I've presented at the beginning of the presentation, actually it's a corrected one. And about a month ago, they had another one, which was much milder, did not show all the damage. So part of the story is wrong economic predictions. Another part of the story is maybe the stock market panicked. And as you can see, after this decline until a month ago, the decline stopped and actually we see some recovery. So that's another part or another contributing reason. And in addition, I would like to suggest yet another explanation, which is of an inflated markets that actually maybe awaited for some kind of a trigger. That's the S&P 500 indexes that we've met before, the index of these 500 large firms. And as you can see, it has skyrocketed in the last few years. So The suggestion here for this third explanation is that this balloon maybe waited for a pin and all the market coordinated around COVID-19 and decided jointly that that's it, the festival is over and now it's time for prices to decline. And again, we see this deflation in prices. Okay, a little bit about the role of media here. So I'm sure all of you have seen articles like this one about coronavirus. So for instance, in CNN, the title said, the spread of coronavirus couldn't have come at a worse time for Corona beer. There is also a Hebrew compatible for this in the Marker, Haaretz economic articles, which says that basically it's like an analysis how coronavirus affect the beer. And all of these articles are said to be evidence-based. For instance, you could have seen these kind of graphs. So here you see the graph of the manufacturer or distributor of Corona. And as you can see, there is a plunge in prices. So evidence-based, basically what we see here, that Corona beer suffered from the virus because of this relationship in the names. However, I would say that this is more or less, not more or less, this is fake news. Why? Because if we take a look at another very large beer manufacturer, say Heineken, this is the green graph. And I can tell you that as a finance professor, if you give me only one of these graphs and ask me which is which, without the titles, I couldn't differentiate between them. So it's not that Corona beer market prices, the stock market prices plunged because of Corona and the relationship, the similarity in names. Actually, also compatible firms basically had the same experience. And in addition to this, if we append yet another graph here, our well-known S&P 500 stocks graph, basically we can see that that's what we see is the total market reaction. So there's nothing special in the stock prices of Corona beer comparing to the rest of the market participants. But still, it was a nice story and it was distributed and translated to virtually all of the world through media. Here another example about investors that seek opportunities.
Professor, sorry, I just want to stop you right there for 1 second and remind all of our viewers tuning in that please feel free to submit any questions that you may have for Professor Kliger. We will ask him questions from the audience at the end of his presentation. So if you have any questions, we'd love to hear from you. Just use the Q&A tab on the bottom of your Zoom screen. Thanks so much, and please continue, Professor.
Thanks, Jake. Indeed, questions are welcome. So take a look at Zoom stock. Investors seek opportunities. We all know Zoom. We actually are using Zoom right this very moment. And you can see that the stock of the Zoom company skyrocketed here to plus 800%. And then today it is traded, quote unquote, only 400% above its price, say, a couple of months ago. And the question is, what happened here? And what is the real economic value of Zoom? Had it been more like an interactive presentation, I would have asked you and would like to hear what you think about it. But here I'll reveal you the answer. So what you see here, actually, it's the wrong Zoom. It's not the Zoom company. ZOOM is a totally different company, a very small one, by the way, which deals with technology. And if you take a look at Zoom's homepage, you will see this picture. By the way, you will see that this company offers online courses, but these online courses are not video conferences. These are simply courses about the technology of Zoom. So people rushed to buy whatever whatever seemed like the Zoom company. And by the way, very interestingly, how slowly the correct news go through the market. I first wrote about this about, say, a month ago here, when Zoom was 5 times more or less higher. The price was 5 times higher than a couple of months ago, 400% return. Nothing happened. Actually, the stock went up to 800%. And now it has been shown in numerous financial newspapers. People know about it, and still the company is traded in like 400% increase since it's comparing to its price in the beginning of, say, February. Okay, let's go to the correct Zoom. So the ticker of the correct of the Zoom video conference company is simply ZM, maybe because ZOOM was already taken, and it went up only 100%. You can see it in the green line below, green shade below. It went up by 100%, so some people and some money found its way to this correct ticker. By the way, there are a lot of activity and a lot of news about this company. Probably you heard in the US that some school districts prohibited using Zoom because of some security and personality issues. Google employees are also now cannot activate Zoom on their computers, etc. And there is actually a lawsuit by one of the buyers of the Zoom in the initial public offering that says that they mishandled all the issue with privacy and security and misreported it. So who knows what is the real price remains an open question. Okay, what can we do? I like to go to some like behavioral economic issues here. What can we do to make the most out of the situation? So first, very practically, we should say yes to the information, the guidelines that we are given in order to try to stop spreading the disease as much as we can. So these very practical and I may say boring instructions of how to wash hands, and say the World Health Organization recommends washing hands for 1 minute. Practically 20 seconds is enough, but 20 seconds is very important. The difference between 10 seconds and 20 seconds is very crucial, because it takes soap to get connected to the virus and to actually to the oily part of the virus about 20 seconds. So this is very important. And other instructions of avoid touching, etc. There was in Israel also by some rabbis an instruction not to kiss mezuzah. This is very practical and very reasonable. I may say another thing, or might suggest, these are very boring instructions, especially for kids. So for kids and for the rest of the population, we should make these instructions available. And for kids, we can also gamify them. So one of the suggestions I'm trying to promote is, given the current status of instructions, of course, no violations, suppose that kids can go out around the block. So let them wear gloves, wet the gloves with some paint, and let the kids go down and up again like a routine, going out of a home and back in, and let them touch everything that they need to touch. So like the doorknobs and the buttons in the elevators, etc. By doing so, they will leave marks like hotspots where on the contaminated areas. And when grown-ups and all of us will go later on, we'll see this and we'll avoid touching these places, or if we touch them, we can wash our hands, etc. So this is one example of gamification. There is a lot of it, but due to time constraints, I have chosen to give one example. Else, what can we do? We should take the instructions seriously, as I said. And here, there's another behavioral issue. The small things that we are doing, in the small changes in behavior, like not touching hands, etc., they have a large effect. And this is sometimes, it's hard to grasp it. As you can see here, this is simply arithmetics of exponential functions. If one person infects more or less 2.5 people, okay, between 2 and 3, on average 2.5 people within 5 days, and basically that's the parameters of COVID-19, then wait for 30 days and you'll get a multiplicative effect of infecting something like 400 people. And if this will be increased by a little bit, then the outcome at the end of the road is huge. So suppose half of the people obey instruction, or all the people obey half of the instructions, then they will infect only 1.25 persons on average. And then you can see that the bottom line, the end of the road effect, is much, much milder. And it goes on and on with 75 compliance. Basically, we go to a situation where the pandemic is very efficiently controlled. Here is another manifestation of this phenomenon, and it's in terms of R naught. So one of the professors in Haifa that has research on public health told me that he used to explain to his students what's R naught, like in several classes, until they got it. And now everybody in the street asks him, what's R naught today? So R naught is the number of people an infected person may infect. And R naught in COVID-19 is about 2.6. Here is the issue that I'd like to point. Suppose R naught is only slightly higher, 3.1. Then after, say, 14 turns of infection, you can see that the total population that will be infected is 200,000 people. Okay, so if we don't take care really about our behavior, the outcomes are very, very sensitive to it. And if we take care of it, say, reduce R naught to 1.9, you can see that the end, like 14 period ahead effect is much milder. Another thing we can do, that is some kind of a prediction. I would not like to predict this very complicated situation, but I may say what may be and how we should in advance consider things what to do. So in the good situation that the pandemic is contained, there might be, and actually some of you may have heard already some voices like this. These are voices of over success. And I call it the winner's curse, the winner's curse. And this basically says, okay, suppose the pandemic is contained. Then people would say, hey, why did we make all this effort? Because there is no problem. Okay? Every politician knows this, that if there is, it's problematic, quote unquote, to solve the problem because it's before you can see it very clearly. And here I would like to refer to behavioral economics insights portray the effects of what we call rare events, events that happens once in a very, very long while. So rare events could be like winning the lottery, or it could be on the other side some damage to an insured car. These are things that happen once for very few times in a repetition of times. So Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky basically described what happens in these rare events. Daniel Kahneman won the Nobel Prize, and Amos Tversky was his colleague. Amos did not receive a prize with him because he died before the prize was given, but it's joint work. And what they said is when people are given description of rare events, they overreact. Okay, for instance, there was a very very good promo for Lotto in Israel about a woman, her name was Ella, that called people and told them that they won the lottery. And that was a huge success because people over the radio basically heard, hey, here is the description of someone that won the lottery, so I can win the lottery as well. And there was an overreaction and a huge demand for lotteries. So here, at the beginning of the pandemic, we have a description, what happens and what happened in Hubei area in China, and now what happens in Italy, and we see the anecdotes, and these are very vivid to us, and we overreact, we tend to overreact. Then, a while after this, we should not do, but we might get used to this. And since we do not see how the virus affects each other, then we might get into indifference. And this is a work by, say, Nassim Taleb and also Ido Er from the Technion. They said that when people are experience the rare events, then they tend to underreact. And for instance, if you go to factories and you see that employees that are highly experienced, they do not use all the precautionary items. Why? Because nothing happened to them for a few years. So they say, hey, nothing happened. Why should I wear these helmets, etc.? So this is the danger of indifference. By the way, Nassim Taleb wrote books about the black swan. What is a black swan? Black swan is an unanticipated event, okay? And then it's unanticipated, so people do not get ready, and then they are surprised when it arrives. So one caveat, COVID-19 is not a black swan. It's not unanticipated. Professional people knew it was going to arrive. People did not know when, but it was, it's not a surprise. Only the timing is a surprise. However, people react to COVID-19 as if it is a surprise, and we see these effects of black swan here. Okay, so to summarize this description, rare events are something that are hard to grasp, so people under or overreact to them depending on circumstances. We should be very sensitive to this while giving instructions, etc., and while tracking the pandemic. What else we can do? So in situations of anxiety, we tend to have tunnel vision. We see the pandemic, we think about the pandemic, we hear in the news about the pandemic, we talk with each other about the pandemic. You can try to have this exercise, talk with your friends and try not to say the word coronavirus for 5 seconds or 5 minutes, okay? That's a very hard exercise because we all the time we think about what's going on, and we see the news, and sometimes it's old news and we see them again, etc. So we are in a tunnel vision situation, and in this situation we have to remind ourselves that there is also the rest of the world, and things, very important things happen in addition or aside of coronavirus. So some of these other things, by the way, are good. And I may say that we want the good changes to stay for good. The Chinese actually put it very nicely in their wording of the word crisis. So the word crisis is composed of basically two words. One of them is danger, and we are all aware of the danger, but the second one is opportunity. So we have the opportunity to change behavior, to get out of the routine, to think out of the box, not just to stay within our tunnel vision. And maybe we should also try to take some of these good things and think how to preserve them for good, for the long run. And having said that, regretfully, I may say that in a historical situation like this, the population's memory is very short. After going back to routine, people forget about this good change or the opportunity and go back to the nitty-gritty small stuff of life. So we should try, at least try to avoid it and to try to get the good changes and make them for the long run. It relates also to a project that I've conducted with a couple of colleagues in University of Haifa. I would like to tell you a little bit about it. That's, by the way, part of one project of this under construction fiber research center. And this project was conducted jointly with Mor Peleg from information science and Shira Zelber-Sagi from public health. And basically, a couple of years ago, I wrote a letter to our then rather new president, Professor Ron Robin, and asked him something very weird. Asked him, Ron, can I please use Eshkol Tower? You see here Eshkol Tower of the University of Haifa. Can I please use the tower for 2 or 3 weeks in order to convey some idea? It will be a secret between you and me, and let's see how it goes on. And the idea was to try to make a fresh start, as you see in the title, try to have some prominent event that will help people change some of their behaviors for good. So it went like this. At the first couple of nights, the whole tower was, all the lights went off, except for this 5 that you can see here. And some people noticed it, and many did not. A few days later, the 2 appeared. And then people from the press and also people that worked in the university start asking questions. What's going on? So what we said is, nice, please, maybe you can guess what's on the tower. And we devoted a special website for answers. And we told people, you can guess what's on the tower. And after you guess, later on, we'll share the result, and also you'll get some prizes, etc. This made a huge buzz in the area of Haifa with thousands of hundreds of replies. And a few days afterwards, the one appeared, and when the whole riddle was on the tower, it was like this, 5210. And the question is, what's 5210? People started to give answers. I can show you here some of the answers. If you were more interactive, I would ask you, what's that? You can guess, maybe write to Jack. What do you think 5210 stands for? So here are some answers that we received. So some people said that's the number of students, 5,210, number of students in the University of Haifa. Okay, well, yes and no. That was the number in the 90s, before the great immigration from the former Soviet Union. Now there are about 18,000 students in the University of Haifa. Another reply was that Levi Eshkol, that's Eshkol Tower, was born at 25th of October. Nice. Some people guess that these 5 and 2 are menorah because this was in Hanukkah. My favorite answer was this one. Okay, sure, 52 minus 10, that's 42. This is the answer to the ultimate question of the life universe of everything, according to the Hitchhiker's Guide of the Galaxy. That's wrong again. And the correct answer is there is a very large project by the World Health Organization that attempts to help people obey 4 very basic rules of good health conduct. And 5210 are as follows. 5 is eat 5 or more fruits and vegetables every day. 2 is use your computer screens and cell phone screens for 2 hours or less every day. 1 is do exercises for 1 hour, at least 1 hour every day. And 0 is sugary drinks. Don't drink any sugary drinks. So we tried to give this fresh start for people that they will be able to say, okay, I conducted in some manner until this project began. And then I remembered the tower and I got a gift also with the logo of this and I changed my ways from this point on. So now we have another ongoing project at the beginning that we would like, first we document what people decide to change in their lives. Some people decide to read more, some people exercise more, some people pay attention to things they did not pay attention to before, some people would like to switch jobs, etc. So now we document it, and later on we would like to provide mechanisms to support these changes for the population. So that's just an ongoing project that I was happy to tell you about. I guess that's more or less it. I'd be glad to have questions.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Thank you so much, Professor, for the wonderful presentation. We'll move on to a couple questions that we have received from our audience. The first one is, any insight that you could provide in describing any inherent differences between Israelis and Americans and how they react to a crisis in general or to COVID-19 in particular?
Okay, that's a very good question. There is a lot of intercultural differences. It's a bit tough to say what's the difference between Americans and Israelis. I can say the following. Let's take, for instance, the difference between Israelis and the Far East. So in the Far East, we find that people obey much more regulations, and they also respect hierarchy. And respect for hierarchy, is it good or bad? It's both. So there is a research that showed that as much as 20% of air collisions could have been prevented if first officers would say something when they noticed that the captain was wrong in his or her decisions. So obedience is one thing that differentiates between cultures. And I guess in Israel, we are on, you know, which side. I guess in the US, it will be somewhere in between. And in Far East, that will be the extreme case. Now, by the way, there are programs to train air crews to say when they think something is wrong, to be bold enough and say it. And by the way, going to the other examples, in Google, if one of the employees finds a bug, an error in the code that she wrote, she'll get a prize, okay? Because we want to show mistakes of others and of the rest in order to avoid the large, huge adverse outcomes.
Mm-hmm. Another question we received from a viewer was, how is the economic behavior of an individual citizen affected by the decision-making or public statements or the tone even of their country's leadership?
Okay, so when we study obeying regulations and instructions, we find that the key components are first understanding the situation, and the second one is trusting the leadership. And by the way, the second one is much more important. If people trust the leadership, they will obey much more. If they only understand the situation and don't trust the leadership, they will not obey in a satisfactory manner. I may leave it to the audience to think in each of the countries what the situation is.
Yeah, absolutely. Professor, just kind of on your estimate, obviously your breadth of knowledge and your experience and how you can even look at other recessions and serious, dips in the markets. How do you feel? I mean, where do you see this coming back? I mean, how long do you think the economy is going to take before it starts to normalize after this, when, it does end? And I think that's a lot of the uncertainty in the financial markets, right? Is part of the panic is because of the uncertainty that's going on in the global financial markets. But when do you think the economy might bounce back from this pandemic?
Okay, so I'd like to first start with observing that all these situations, they are chaotic situations. And when I mean chaos, I don't mean it like in the day-to-day or like biblical manner, I may say. There is a mathematical field of study which is called chaos. And chaos are very complicated equations of cause and effect. And in these equations, we can see some regularities. We know that if something bad happens, then there will be a crash. But another insight from these chaos models is the butterfly effect. Butterfly effect says, when you enter the chaotic situation, but how it will evolve and what will happen, one can never tell. Very complicated to tell because very minor changes can have huge effect. We have seen one example. If in a specific country, if people will obey the instructions and reduce R naught from, say, even let's take a mild situation, like what happens in influenza. If R naught is a little larger than 1, it's an epidemic. If R naught is 0.99, the situation is under total control. So very mild changes could have here huge effect. And as you've seen also in the example of the financial markets, if had we asked financial professionals about the situation, I guess more than half of them, maybe like the huge crucial majority would have said that markets are inflated. But then, should you buy or not buy stocks? Everybody continued to buy, including the professionals. Everyone from her or his own reasons, by the way. So for instance, the financial market bought the stocks because they live out of it and they get commission. And people say, hey, I know that markets are inflated, but they are still going up and up and up. So why should I go out now? And then it could have been forecasted that there will be a date when this balloon will simply be deflated. What is the nature of the pin that actually punched it? I don't know. And we know now that COVID-19 did this. Okay, so now going back, as a researcher, I never give predictions because we see in financial markets that professional predictions are very, very poor. I can talk about the history and do some comparisons. So first, as we know, out of all of the historical recessions, we went out and markets actually went very vivid afterwards. In addition, there could be several reasons to crashes. if we go back to the 2007, 2008 crash, this was a structural crash due to the banking system, the financial system, etc. And it was within actually all the economic activity and economic players, etc. The situation now is different. The situation now is like some exogenous, out of the economy cause actually arrived. Okay, so the result depends on to what extent we can tame this main cause. I have seen some predictions that say that after such a crash, there could be 3 patterns out of it. One of them, the worst one, is an L-shaped. So we went down like the letter L, and it almost never goes up. This is very rare. We don't see it actually. Another one is a V-shape, that we go down and pretty fast up. Yet another one is a U-shape. We went down, hold for a while, and then go up. So some predictions say that if the market will, that if the virus will be taken care of correctly, then it will be maybe a narrow U-shape. And narrow U-shape means like it is called the test tube shape. Now, I don't know if this will happen. I think that, there is another chaotic system which we all are very well know of, which is weather. Weather is chaotic. The equations that describe global weather and even local weather are very, very complex and non-linear and involve a lot of variables. We can say something about the weather tomorrow. We can say a little bit about the weather a week from now. We can say virtually nothing about the weather a month from now, etc. So take this, and now as an allegory, financial markets are yet another complex, chaotic system. But what's the main difference between weather and financial markets? In financial markets, the actors' behavior changes the market. So if a weather forecaster will say, tomorrow it will be sunny, I don't think it will affect the weather. But in financial markets, if some forecaster or some decision maker or some opinion leader will say something, this may have a huge effect and huge consequences over time and in very large magnitude.
So that's all the time we have for now, unfortunately. Very sorry to any questions that we did not get to, but if you'd like to submit questions, please send them to info@asuh.org, and we'd be happy to pass them along to Professor Kliger for him to answer. Thank you so much, Professor. This has been a fascinating conversation. I've really enjoyed it. I hope all of our viewers have as well. So thank you so much. And on behalf of the American Society of the University of Haifa, we thank also our viewers for joining us. Please stay tuned for information on our next webinar briefing, which should be coming up soon. And everyone, please stay safe and healthy. Thank you so much again.